Studio at 620 WMNF Radio Theatre Project presents I Am a Cuban Sandwich by Richard and Mary Ellen DiPietro, adapted for radio and directed by James Rayfield. Looking back on growing up in Tampa's Ybor City, Richard DiPietro combines fact and a bit of fantasy to return to a place and time that exists now only in the memories of Tampa natives, who might say of themselves, I am a Cuban sandwich.
My dad worked as a milkman with Florida Dairy for 40 years. His route took him throughout Ybor City. Went to all the schools, most of the stores, and of course the restaurants. Cruised right down 7th Avenue in his big old milk truck, hitting them all on the road. Spanish Park, Columbia, La Tropicana, Huevos, Silver Ring, Las Novedades. Chances are, if you got a café con leche in Ybor City, my dad brought that milk. Sometimes during the summer, he'd take me with him to ride along in the truck. Rather than real work, I got treated like a prince. You see, the guys who worked in these places all knew and loved my dad, so at each stop, they'd offer up something special for the kid. Cuban toast or hot cocoa in the morning, guava pastry for a snack. For lunch, Cuban sandwich. Afterwards, maybe a granita or coconut ice cream. For a chubby little kid like me, it was la dolce vita. That's why I could never understand why so many people I grew up with were always complaining about their childhood, how tough it was.
Oh, I never want to go through that again.
In our family, there never was much money. We lived very modestly. Loved each other quite a bit, and we sure did eat well. All in all, I lived a charmed life as a boy. Probably because when I was very young, I met Marilyn Monroe. My godparents, like my dad, were Sicilian. They lived right across the street. Since they had no children of their own, they were really kind of like a second set of parents to me. You know, Italians have a saying.
Life is too hard to have just one father.
They took me with them out to eat or dinner on special occasions, movies at the Tampa Theater. Once when I was little, they took me with them to stay at the Thai in Wellington Beach. It was one of their places, as they like to say. Meaning they went there every year. People there knew them by name. In the coffee shop one morning, my godparents were all excited, buzzing about something, and one of the waitresses had told them. Apparently, somebody was staying in the hotel. I really wasn't paying much attention, because I had pancakes to finish. Then later on, as we're heading out the door, there they were, Joe and Marilyn. Hand in hand, they're strolling past. My godfather says something to DiMaggio in Sicilian. Joe turns around, smiling that big goofy grin of his, shares a laugh. They both share a laugh, just like I've seen men in my family do so many times. My godmother is shaking Marilyn's hand, telling her how much they like her. Me, I'm in this little blue seersucker suit, my Easter outfit. And all of a sudden, Marilyn comes down to my eye level and says,
"And who is this little man?"
I'm Richard.
"Hello, Richard. I'm Marilyn, and this is Joe."
I squinted up at DiMaggio, seemed about 20 feet tall, smiling down at me.
"How old are you, Richard?"
Her voice felt like an embrace. I mean, a little intimidated, but not one to let her down. I held up 5 little fingers. Then she did the most amazing thing. She smiled up at Joe. She arched one perfect eyebrow. I looked up at him to see if he noticed. I realized he wasn't smiling down at me anymore. Now he was beaming down at her. Now you might wonder, what struck me the most about being this close to Marilyn Monroe? I mean, was it the trademark blonde hair? That sexy little girl voice? How are you going to forget that beauty mark? But you know what really got to me about her? Her wonderful smell. It seemed to wrap me in a heavenly cloud. It was a perfume. Probably Chanel, I know that now, but then I'd never smelled anything like that before. It was so heady, it made me feel a little dizzy, kind of like incense in church when you sit too close at high mass. Being as I was a little intimidated, I ended up just shyly looking down at her feet. She was wearing these black flats, and her foot was flexed, so the lining was showing. It was shiny, like silk, and brightly colored with stripes of gold and red and brown, and her foot was so white in contrast. I was mesmerized.
"Well, Richard, it was very nice meeting you. Bye-bye."
Bye.
DiMaggio already had his arm around Marilyn's shoulder, and she turned her head and threw me one of those brilliant smiles. My godparents were all flustered.
"Bella madre, can you believe that?"
It was so nice. What a happy couple.
I stood around wondering, what the hell was that all about? You see, I had no idea then who this person was. Just as she left me with this idiotic grin on my face that lasted for the rest of the week. A daze that would soon work its way into part of our family mythology, because it was only about a year later that the 7-year itch came out, and Marilyn took off like a rocket. My mom used to love looking through magazines. Photoplay, Life, Look. Sometimes she would order these books of the whole year in review, full of photos and stories. I'm going through the bookcase one day and I noticed a new one had a 1955 on the cover. I'm turning the pages, looking at some pictures, and oh my God, Marilyn's in here. And her dress is all blowing up. And you could see her legs and her panties. My mouth was all getting dry. I could feel my little heart hammering away. I needed to inspect this a little further in private. Behind the sofa. Perfect. With the book all laid out, I'm going through the pages over and over, and suddenly...
What the hell are you doing back there? Oh, you shouldn't be reading this.
No, it's mine, it's mine. She sent it for me.
Well, we'll keep it for you till you're big enough.
And so began a life of woman worshipping for Richard. But then came a day, and it didn't seem that long afterwards. I was walking through the halls of Our Lady of Perpetual Help with a note in my hand for one of the sisters. And suddenly there was a rustle of fabric from behind me, and Sister Stephanis hurried past. She stopped and gestured to one of the other nuns in the classroom as his sister came out of the door.
Marilyn Monroe just died.
Both the nuns were stricken. Tears running down their face, they hugged each other, sobbing like little girls. Shocked and saddened as I was by the news, I still couldn't take my eyes off the two sisters. These were young women, not much more than girls, really, with their own lives and emotions outside of this place. I never thought of them that way before. To me, they'd always been penguins, humorless, unemotional. Standing there staring with my mouth open, I wasn't even aware that I'd been crying until I looked down and saw the stains of the teardrops in the note in my hand. Lost, I turned and bolted down the corridor. I stepped out into the old metal fire escape. Neighborhood spread out before me, cigar factory standing tall in the distance. It was a typical, sunny, Ybor City day. It just didn't seem as bright as it should be.
Richard, what are you doing out here? Did you hear what we were talking about in the hallway?
Yes, sister.
She's at peace now. Come on, let's go back inside.
I can't, sister. The note.
I'll take care of that. Don't you worry. Now go to the lavatory, wash your face, and then back to your class. Everything will be fine.
Thank you, sister.
Oh, Richard.
I loved her.
We all did.
Even though I said nothing, I was thinking, not like I did. My mother let me stay home from school the next day. She said it was because I was running a temperature, but I wasn't. She knew I was just sad. It was a lifetime later. I was working at the President's Club, a private restaurant for power dining in downtown St. Pete. I wore a tuxedo every night. During spring training, the Yankees owners, coaches, and players came in for dinner. My heart went into my throat when I saw DiMaggio walking in the door. He still looked great. Smooth silver hair, impeccable suit and tie, matching handkerchief, gleaming wingtips, and the way he moved, the way he carried himself, like a hero. I felt like a little kid again as he walked right past me, heading for the table. Now at this club, we were supposed to respect the guests' privacy and not actually engage them in conversation. But later on, after dinner, while I was pouring coffee, I noticed Joe sitting by himself at one end of the table where everybody else talked big business. He seemed a little distant, a little sad. If you didn't know who he was, what he'd done, you might feel a little sorry for him. Finally, I got my nerve up. You probably don't remember me, but I met you once before, Mr. DiMaggio.
Did you, son?
And I realized how silly that sounded. Joltin' Joe had likely shaken 100,000 hands. So I went ahead and told him my story about meeting with Marilyn at the beach. About halfway through, he seemed to look at me for the first time. I saw him glance at my name tag, and his face changed. It softened somehow. His dark eyes clouded over, and for a moment, there was the sound of waves and the smell of salt water. It was just like time travel. I got self-conscious and mumbled some apology about interrupting him. Later, the staff was wishing the guests good night. We were all lined up, and I was at the end of the line, and I felt someone touch my arm. I looked up to see Joe.
She was always talking about having a child, you know. Used to say she wanted a little boy, just like the one we met at the beach, Richard.
I started to get choked up and put my head down.
No, it was a good thing. Just didn't work out. It was nice seeing you again.
Walking away, he seemed his old self, smiling and nodding to people on the way out. They'd always seemed like the most romantic couple to me, Joe and Marilyn. Even though their marriage lasted less than a year, for that brief time, they were America's sweethearts. And then it all came to such a heartbreaking end. And yet, here I was, eking out my humble existence, happily married, with a loving wife and a wonderful son. Like I said, I'm a lucky guy.